Our next speaker today is John-Fenton. John was born and raised in Wyoming, where he says he, and I quote, grew up on the back of a horse, learning a deep love and appreciation for the land and nature. Now that he's fully grown, John is dedicated to protecting the land and way of life that he loves. This includes working on a ranch near Pavillion, Wyoming, which some of you may have heard of, where, with his wife Catherine and their 4 sons, he raises hay and pasture cows on their ranch that has belonged to Catherine's family for more than 40 years. As you're about to learn, gas drilling operations in the east of Pavillion have had devastating consequences for the people living there, prompting John to speak out. John is the chairman of the Pavillion Area Concerned Citizens, a member of the board of directors of the Powder River Basin Resource Council, and he recently wrote an article that was published in the High Country News. Please join me in welcoming John-Fenton.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today, and I can't help but notice a lot of similarities driving through the small towns here and through the mountains that where we're from. And the most important thing that you can take away from this is that although it may seem contrary to what I'm about to say, every one of you in here working with the person sitting next to you has the power to do something about this. Believe it or not, this is still the United States of America, and we still have the right to stand up for ourselves and to take action against people who seek to make profit at our expense. Some of the things I'm going to tell you are really unpleasant, and I think some of the things I'm going to tell you, you can take home and do something with. We started this because we were impacted by it. Now, a little background, I've made my money in the oil and gas industry because, you know, cows and horses and hay aren't always worth a whole hell of a lot, and you got to make your money when you can. And so my wife Catherine and I, we ran a welding business for a number of years where we pipelined, we hooked wells up, we did, you know, we made good money from this. We have family who still works and makes good money, but there are some misconceptions that go along with that. You will see quite a few jobs during the drilling phase of this. A lot of the people are brought in. You'll see a very small effect to your local economy as far as people actually making money and having a career with this. Once a field is drilled and put into production, it takes very few people to actually run that field. So you're not going to see a big boom from this. Start off this first picture here. This is looking from the front porch of our house, kind of looking northwest. And actually, there was a pronghorn standing out there I tried to get a picture of, but my wife's a photographer, I'm not, so you can't see the antelope. But this is why we're here. This is what's near and dear to us. And you can take a whole dump truck load of money, and that might make you happy for a while, but you can't eat money. You can't drink natural gas. You know, there's certain things that people require to live. Water, air, and clean land are the 3 basics. And all the money in the world won't change that because we've got a piece of ground here that we dearly love. There's 4 generations of our family here right now, from Kathy's parents down to our grandchildren. And unfortunately, we might be the last generation to run this. This is not an easy prospect for us, but the thought of our family being injured or our kids being sick, you can take your family and be happy anywhere. We may have to sacrifice a way of life that's damn hard to come by, and if more people live the way of life that we do, I think this would be a better place. People would have a deeper understanding of why this is so important. So, this is what happened when they drilled around us. This is looking just about opposite from the last photograph. This is our house that my sons and I did everything but pour the concrete and insulate this house. You know, there's blood, sweat, and tears into this. The shop building off to the right, there's corn out there, and the black you see is cows. The drill rig in the foreground, we have a minimum setback of 350 feet. It's 360 feet from our water well. Up there, there's a crane they're setting up For the drilling operation on the next well, it's 355 feet. And if you were to go right over here, there's one that's inside 300 feet. And this is the way it was portrayed to us. We're going to come into your community and we're going to provide jobs for you. We're going to be a part of this community because we care about what happens here. And I can tell you right now that that's categorically a lie. There's no other way to put it. Because we've got some local guys that work there, and you know what? They're guys that we buy our seed from, that maybe we help at a branding, you know, and those guys love the land like we do, but they're making a living. The people who make the decisions about what goes on here and who would make the decisions here are not from Colorado. They're not from Peonia. They're not from Pavillion, Wyoming. They're from a corporate office somewhere, and they're worried about their bottom line and their stockholders. And if you think there's any other reason that they're here, it's a misconception. And we're living proof of that. This was taken from the front porch looking the opposite direction. The tank right here is the tank that's less than, well, it's about 245 feet from our front door. We get a huge amount of volatile emissions that come into the house. We have to bring the kids and the grandkids inside. If you sleep with the windows open in the summer because it's hot, a lot of times you wake up with the house full of fumes. And what you see in the background is a fracking operation occurring in the middle of an ag field. These are nothing wells. They're 4,000 to 5,000 feet deep. I think I read at one time if they extracted all the gas that they're trying to produce, it would supply a little more than 1 day supply for the United States. So every one of these wells was hydraulically fractured. You also hear a myth that this takes place so deep that there's no possible way that this could have any impact. We've found through our own digging that the shallowest hydraulic fracture in our area was 1,700 feet. Our water well is 540 feet deep. In the area, potable water wells range from 35 feet to 1,200 feet deep. They're playing Russian roulette with our future, and unfortunately, they've landed on a full cylinder, or a full chamber a couple times, because we're now in the middle of an EPA study that came out at the end of December with a tentative conclusion that hydraulic fracturing has impacted the potable water zones there. But this idea of just hydraulic fracturing, we cannot get hung up on this. This is a dirty process from the beginning to the end. The drilling, the production, like you heard in a previous program about all the diesel fumes. A lot of our problem here is from inadequate cement encasing and not knowing the geology or the hydrology of the area. We have water wells that are 500-600 feet deep, and the gas well that's 300 feet away is cased with surface casing to 350 feet. That's supposed to be your barrier to protect your water. Now, we're playing catch up. What gives me hope here is that you guys working together have a real chance to do something special here, and you can set a precedent. You can help change the future of the way things are done. And that's important because we've got generations coming up that want to raise an orchard full of peaches or cherries or apples, that want to raise cattle, that want to live where they can drink the water out of their tap and breathe the air when they walk outside. And that's our responsibility. We're the ones who have the power now to make sure that future generations can have the things that we've been able to enjoy. So there's a huge opportunity here, and seeing all the people in this room really gives me a lot of hope, because this is where it starts. This is our house. This shot was also in Gasland. They were fracking a well behind the house. And every time that they would release the piping on the well, our house was enveloped like this 14 times over the period of about 6 days. We could never find out what we were being exposed to no matter what we did. And Wyoming did pass a disclosure law, but there's a couple things wrong with that. Anything pre-2010 is grandfathered in as before the law. And they put in an exclusion saying that if you will come in and apply for trade secret exemption and we feel that it's valid, we will give that. They're just rubber stamping them now. So the rules are only as good as the people enforcing them. But this was not an uncommon occurrence in our area. This is a map from Environmental Protection Agency Region 8 investigation that's going on. And the reason I put this up is because I read through some of the EA and I heard no significant impact. What this shows, all the blue dots are gas wells. The red and yellow checkered dots are our water wells. This right there is our water well. So you know what they can do with their no significant impact. Because I can tell you that half of this would be significant, a quarter of this would be significant. And the title of my presentation was There's No Going Back. And that's kind of a gloomy title, but it's the truth. When one of these is put into the ground, when this starts to occur, your community will never be the same. That's why it's so important that people stay unified and speak with a common voice on this. And you can make a difference, and you can protect what's important to you and what's vital to you. This is a production pad on our place. This doesn't even have a well on it. What they do is some of the wells in the field, because they wanted to take 1.5 acres apiece out of our hay field for each one of the 24 wells that are out there, we said, well, you need to maybe go on the dry land and put the production pads out of the area of where we're trying to cut hay and farm. So they did. There's 3 separators, which is the equipment that pulls all the fluids out of the gas, because this is, although tell you it's dry gas, it's wet gas. It has a lot of volatiles, BTEX chain stuff, real saline water, radioactivity comes up with this. And it's all put in this production tank that you can see has a 10-inch vent pipe that vents all those volatiles into the air. What happened is right over here is our main irrigation canal that waters our 200 acres. It's 35 feet from this tank. This happens more frequently than you think. The truck driver pulled up and he filled up with produced water in his truck, and he forgot to disconnect the hose when he pulled away. It jerked the valve and everything out of the back of the truck. So his solution was, rather than backing up and emptying it into this containment, he drove around in circles until the truck was empty, and then he went home. We found this because we were going to move cows into this area, and we're out fixing fence and stuff. We live within the Wind River Indian Reservation, and this is a tribal location. The tribe owns a lot of the mineral rights, and rightly so. They should have that because this was their land. They have a deeper right to this than anyone. But those rights are overseen by the Bureau of Land Management. And I can tell you my personal experience with the Bureau of Land Management would fit on the top of a penny, and none of it's worth talking about because they're not worth the powder to take to blow them to hell. I called the man up who's supposed to represent us and take care of this, and I told him what had happened and how close it was to our irrigation canal. And he said, well, you know what? In Cannon does a really good job, and I trust him, and he hung the phone up on me. You know, and if he hadn't been 40 miles away, we might have had a more in-depth conversation. But we've got more important things to do than that. So their idea of cleaning this up was they brought in 2 dump trucks full of road base, and they spread it out with a backhoe to cover this up, you know. And this, I might tell you, has only happened about 5 years ago. So this is not the old days that they talk about, you know, that things are done different now, by God, because we're modern and we have all this technology. This was only done in the past 5 years. This is kind of hard to see because I think I put it in the computer upside down. But what this is if you look over here, these are corrugations in a hay field. This was the very last well drilled on our place. About 2006, the flow line ruptured. The flow line is the tube that conveys the gas and all the liquids to the production equipment. So this line, at less than 4 years old, ruptured and boiled up through the hayfield. Now, we were assured that they have these systems called the SCADA system, and I don't know what SCADA means, but they're supposed to be able to remotely sense when they have a leak. Well, my dog found this. We were going down to irrigate, so that's my SCADA system. We had to shut our irrigation water down, get stuff moved. They came out and dug this up, and they took a PID, a photoionization detector, and they said, oh, there's nothing bad in the water. They waved their magic wand over it. They buried it back in. This is at the head of the field. The catch ditch is 1,100 feet down, where the water actually drains out of the bottom of the field. We now have a dead spot that's about 40 feet wide and 1,100 feet long. And for 2 years now, I can't get anything to grow in it, not even weeds. So I'm here to tell you, my word means something to me. If I tell you something and I look you in the eye and we shake hands, I was raised that you can take that to the bank, or I'm not worth the boots I'm standing in. But you're not dealing with an individual here. You're not dealing with somebody who has personal responsibility or an interest in this. You're dealing with a corporation who will say anything to make you shut up and go away and make you believe their propaganda. And I worked for these people. I made money from these people. And I can tell you, I've seen things from both sides of the coin. And although the things I'm telling you here are not the most pleasant things, I'd rather be in the shoes I'm in right now, fighting for what I'm fighting for, than working for them still, because what we're doing here is real and will make a difference. And it's very important to remember that you will feel at times like somebody's kicked you in the stomach. You will feel that I can't write another damned letter, I can't make a phone call, I can't go to a public meeting. But what helps me is coming someplace like this and talking to people who have the same loves and interests that I do, and realize that I'm not alone in this. And I can tell you right now that this room of people is not alone either, because there's a lot of other people in Texas, in New York, in Wyoming, in New Mexico, in Canada, in Australia, in Japan, that are fighting for the same things that we're fighting for. It might be a different language, it might be a different accent or a different way of doing things, but you do have people who are standing with you on this. So you got to keep that in the back of your head. Now, my neighbor, Lewis Meeks, he's a great man. He worked on the Alaskan pipeline. He took all that money, he bought his little piece of paradise out here. He's got pear trees and peach trees, and he's got every animal on Noah's Ark for his granddaughter, and if she wanted something else, he'd probably find that too. His house used to be where we grow a lot of sugar beets, and we had migrant labor that would come through to hoe the beets. And every morning, they would stop at Lewis's to fill their canteens up before they went to work. And back in the day when we had only a dozen gas wells, and the little gas plant east of his house would come and fill their water bottles up for their cooler there at the gas plant. But about 2005, his water started to smell like diesel fuel. So Lewis went to the state engineers, got a permit to drill a new well to the same depth that we did, 540 feet. And this is the result. That is a water well derrick, shrouded in ice. This is on the 20th of December. At 340 feet below surface, they hit methane through a 4-inch water well casing, or 6-inch, I don't remember, whatever it is, the plastic water well casing. In 3 days, this produced almost 4 million cubic feet of natural gas. Now, what they said was he drilled into a pocket. The thing they don't tell you is that after Lewis had to go get an injunction to get them to come in and shut this off, which required him quit claiming the deed to all his property in Canada to get this done. They sealed this water well off. All the gas wells around him went up in production, including one 1,500 feet away that tripled in production. This ties in perfectly with what was said earlier. You cannot do this in close proximity to water like this and not have an impact. This has had a huge impact. The land that he owns free and clear, that he went in to borrow money on, they said, Lewis, this is a bank he's done business with for 30 years. We would give you more money on your signature because your land is worthless. We don't want it if you default on this loan. Kathy and I, out of an act of frustration and actually kind of a brilliant suggestion on Kathy's part, we decided to file a property tax protest with our Board of Equalization. And we're in a county that's very pro-industry. Every one of the reasons that we protested our taxes was because of oil and gas impacts. We went before the hearing, we spoke our case. The man looks at me and he goes, "How much do you think your property's been devalued?" I was kind of being a wiseacre. I said 50%. He kind of looks at me and he goes, "Is that all?" So we proved a hell of a point, you know. But the truth is that our property is probably worth less than 50% of what it was. You know, and as you know, with an agricultural background or anything like that, that's your retirement. That's your future sitting there. That's your kids' future, you know. So that's a hard thing to face. This is one I want to kind of finish off with, and I've got a few other things to say past this slide. This was taken off our front porch, and it just worked out just right that this little thunderstorm moved through and we happened to get this picture. You know, their pot of gold at their end of their rainbow is damn sure not your pot of gold. It's been a pot of poison for us. And so all these things that we've experienced led us to do a few things. And I want to talk just briefly about this to let you know that people can make a difference. We spent over a decade trying to get the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, the Governor's Office, and the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to come out and take a look at what was going on with our property and with our water and our air. The only time that the DEQ would show up, they would show up with an Encana official and they would show us an Encana test that said, "Look, everything is perfect. There's nothing wrong out here. You people are complaining because you'd like to sue the company, you'd like an easy way to get rich, which I can tell you there's a damn lot easier ways than this." This prompted us to do something that Lewis Meeks, my neighbor, and we work with a wonderful lady named Deb Thomas, who's an organizer with the Powder River Basin Resource Council. They contacted Region 8 EPA out of Denver, and we went to them. We thought if the state's not going to do something, we're going to go over their head and we're going to see if someone else will help us. We met with them. We had a basic presentation like this. They came and drove around with us for a day and came and saw the things we were talking about, which no one in the state of Wyoming had done. We're now entering the 4th year of an EPA investigation. They've done 4 real rounds of water testing. They've found the impacts we're talking about. They've found the things that, the thermogenic methane, the methane that comes deep within the formation is showing up in our water. We have butane, propane, ethane, heptane, all the markers of thermogenic methane in our water that bubbles like club soda when you set it on the counter in a glass. We've got benzene in our water. They drilled monitoring wells so they could get a real idea of what was going on. We have benzene 35 times the safe limit within a 200-foot vertical separation of our water well. We have things now that where the baby calves, when they get past the point of nursing, where they're starting to nibble on hay and water, if we have them in the water in this area, we start to lose them. We have to move them out. This affects everything that we do. But back to the thing with the EPA is that was 5 of us that went down and talked to the EPA. Pavillion has been in the national news. We have made it a point that they're not going to make us go away. And that's the message I want to leave you with, is that there are all these terrible consequences that can happen with this energy production run amok. They'll wrap it in the American flag. They'll tell you we need energy independence. They will tell you anything to get in and do this, and it's all about profit. But the people here, like I've said over and over again, are the ones who have the true power. The things you have to remember is that a divided community is a weak community. If you can get the people to stand together, and that's the farmers, the cowboys, the people who run the coffee shop, you know, the man who changes the oil in your car, you all have the same interest. You need to drink clean water, you need to breathe clean air, you need a healthy environment to live in. And you stand up for yourself, you stand up for your children, and it's not always easy to do this. I flunked speech class in high school, you know, but when they say no significant impact, you think of this and you tell them bullshit. because that's what it is. And you stand up for yourselves, and you can make this something that you can all be proud of 50 years from now. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, again, we're just going to take a few concise questions, please. Uji. So the question is any evidence about effects on your cattle with reproduction, et cetera?
No, we haven't. Where we have an advantage here is the cows that we have in the wintertime that we feed. In about 2 weeks from now, they're going to go up either in the mountains or out on the prairie, and that's where the breed back will occur and all that. We get them in the end of November, 1st of December, usually, to feed them. Like I said, the impacts come after the calves hit the ground because their system's not made to deal with this. It's not mature yet. The biggest thing we had last year was a glycol leak that killed 13 calves just within an area. Once Encana went in to pay for the necropsies, glycol poisoning became selenium deficiency, commonly referred to as white muscle disease. And I'll give you a $100 bill if you can tell me anybody who's had 13 calves simultaneously drop dead from selenium poisoning. And the necropsy reports have disappeared. So.
The question is, have you tested your irrigation water? How does it affect your hay production?
We live just east of the Wind River Mountains. South Pass is right there above Lander. So all of our irrigation water is snow melt runoff that's in a Bureau of Rec irrigation project, the largest one in the state of Wyoming. We do not irrigate with groundwater. There's been some incidents where they've had leaking pits get into the canal. That was in years past. It was hushed up real quick. There has not been any definitive testing like we talked about earlier with the irrigation water, but the hay production is fabulous there as long as we have the water.
Okay. Yes.
What would you say to a farmer or rancher who's looking at significant income and considering working with an oil company?
So the question was, what would you say to a farmer or rancher who has significant income in talking to the oil company, oil and gas?
You know, that's a hard thing because, as we've talked about, ag's not the way to get rich in most cases. The thing is that the people I know, see, we live on split estate ground. We have no choice in what happens with us. We can deal with them or they can bond on for $2,000 and do whatever they want. Now, I do know people who own their own mineral rights who, you know, that money is tempting because you're wanting to provide for your family better. You're wanting to make a better way of life. Unfortunately, like we talked about earlier, money doesn't replace your drinking water or your air, or with us, the very land. We might lose everything. We may have to leave this. So, you know, I would say unless they can prove beyond a doubt that this stuff will not happen, and I mean more than somebody coming and patting you on the back and making you a half-assed promise, you better consider what's worth more, a monetary gain that may be temporary or the complete loss of your land and your way of life. And personally, if I had it to do right now, knowing what I'd know, I'd turn it down. I'd rather be a poor, healthy farmer with my family, living on the land we love, than being rich and being in limbo.
Okay, Uli? The question was, how deep is the gas deposit?
The shallowest production zone that we know of that they're tapping is 1,700 feet, and it goes down to about 4,500 feet.
Okay, we're going to have to move on. Thank you very much, John, for coming.
Thank you.